And all of these means are cheat codes. You know, you plug in the Game Shark and hit a few buttons, and all of a sudden, yeah, you can hang out with things that, you know, you look at most accounts of people who are on psychedelic trips, and, you know, where do you find there? You find entities who are like, hey, I'd love to tell you all about this stuff. Do you want to be enlightened? I got enlightenment for days. And also, I'm a giant fractal jester, and that's awesome, right? You like clowns?
We live in little worlds, predictable worlds. What you see is what you get. 8-ball in the corner pocket if you just hit it right. Rack them up and do it again. Just matter in motion, angles, and energy. Mechanical cause and effect, nothing to see here, folks.
But some of us are discovering that in some times and places, usually at the borders and on the margins, a strange underworld peeks through, challenging our settled notions of a sterile, explored, mechanistic world. Lights in the forest, lights in the sky, voices in the dark, a knock at the door, shapes in the trees.
My name is Ward. I make adventure films about high strangeness.
And I'm Jim. I make teenagers talk to me about dead people. Come along as we explore and reflect on bizarre experiences, our enchanted world, and mythic history. This is the Ohio Howl. Time passes. For most of us, we don't even notice until today is yesterday, and we're already living in tomorrow. We're used to it. Life comes fast. We take it for granted that we're noticed, even in passing, and not forgotten when time blurs forward. What happens, however, if certain people or places slip outside of the flow of time? Can events or personalities scar the edges of reality enough to become a blind spot of memory, or an after image in some old story most of us don't remember anymore?
So I sent you guys the links to the Meadow Project and the special feature for it, what we called Hellman Lens. I'm interested what you thought of it. Not asking for compliments for the filmmaking. It is what it is, but the story. And I know, Jim, you and I have talked about this. You've got the book right over there on the table. I didn't realize that I'd lent you Trey's book, but yeah, what do we think about this?
Well, I think it follows pretty clearly with even what Trey has on the back cover of his book is talking about. And the book is The Meadow Project. It's the same name as the documentary. But he draws the connection of, there are a lot of places that are well documented all over the world, though a lot of them are in North America, that are clear places of high strangeness, right? Being the fancy way of saying it's a spooky spot. Right. And I think a lot of what they do there, in the Meadow specifically, lends itself to understanding that there's a clear pattern of thin places on the earth. They even talk about that, we can use perhaps more sciencey words like this is a dimensional rift. Right. And that's not wrong. I think that's a valid way of looking at it from one frame of reference. I'm increasingly convinced over the years that there are many different frames of reference that apply simultaneously. We've talked at length before about, there is the spiritual and the physical are overlapping. They are not separate and distinct and bifurcated. Right. That is the cruft of modernism speaking there, not reality. Even looking anywhere, open the Old Testament and poke a finger at a page, and there's going to be the assumption, the working assumption, and the proven assumption in their experience that these things are very closely related. So in the same vein that we may have descriptions in Scripture of consecrated and desecrated places, there's a spiritual wound or a spiritual elevation in various points physically. That shouldn't surprise us. And the Meadow is one good example of a dedicated examination of a place like this, where there are too many things that don't work correctly to be a fluke, that there's repetition, and especially to the credit of ASOG, the group that works there, that Trey heads, there is a lot of redundancy and thoroughness and consistency in their approach to say, we're not just wandering out in the woods and saying, I saw something I don't understand, I guess it's a special place. Right. They're saying, yeah, we all have those experiences, but let's try and find some empirical backing to it. And we shouldn't be afraid of the word empiricism in the same way that I said we shouldn't be afraid of saying there are spiritual realities, things. It's both. We shouldn't be surprised that one bleeds to the other.
Right.
And I think, some of the things that stood out to me right away was some of the methodologies they were employing. I think my favorite was their use of, I don't know if it's the right word, I forget the exact term they use, but like a chronometer or something basically to measure, does time work differently for some reason? And can we actually measure that? There's so many accounts in the paranormal or the preternatural where time is lost. Somebody goes out for a 5-minute walk and comes back 2 hours later or the next day, or they're missing for a month. Those are obviously extreme cases, but there's a clear precedent set, again, all over the world where time gets a bit strange. And I appreciate they used, basically dual sensors to try and say, like, over here where we're not interacting with the thing, 1 second, 1 second, 1 second. And then eventually these guys go across the field or they go up on the ridge or whatnot. And time is not registering as 1 to 1 second. Sometimes it's very slow, sometimes it's sped up. Yeah. And this is something, again, where they can take these devices back and say, well, whether or not it's exactly what we're describing, something is going on here that is very aberrant. Our experience doesn't suggest it is, but this thing here, the data recording says clearly there is. That being just one of many examples where they are trying to apply some rigor and consistency here. And I think it does pay off. Like, they have a body of evidence there that says clearly something is out of whack.
Right. Yeah, they, Trey is interesting and ASOG is interesting in that they attempt to marry, there's sort of in the world of paranormal investigation, you wouldn't say an industry because an industry has standards and there's not really, it's very, there are lots of different ways. There are lots of different things that people do. And they attempt to marry sort of experiential data, the experiences that people have as sort of biosensors themselves with the empirical recorded data. And it's rare to mix those things. Like, you have certain... the Newkirks come to mind where it's almost entirely experiential, or more the ghost huntery type shows where there's a lot of the whole point of the exercise is what scientific data you can gather. And I think one of the things that Tony and Joel and I, the guys that have gone on these trips, we lean toward the experiential side as well, because I think that's the way that people interact with these things most often is in their experience. It's your perception of the thing, rather than measurable in some way. Yeah. So, they're an interesting group. I think it might be helpful to explain what the Meadow Project is. So Trey Hudson and a number of people from I think it started out as the Oxford Paranormal Society, a paranormal investigation club in the South. They were going on different investigations, and they were led through a series of reports and stuff to this location that's a meadow, whose location they keep secret, covered by NDAs, and they're very careful with who they identify it to, in order to keep people from going in and contaminating the area. Which is another thing that, like Skinwalker Ranch in Utah is another one where the security is pretty tight. Right. I've hopped a fence and stood on the other side of it on Skinwalker Ranch, but it's pretty hard to get into. And, for the same reason, probably to try to contain the environment as pristine as possible for measuring things. So Trey himself went on Tony Merkel's show, The Confessionals, and told this story. There are many, many weird things that have happened since they've studied this location. But probably the big one, the kind of cornerstone of the strangeness that they've recorded is they were out in pairs one evening, spread throughout this meadow, and they had what they characterized, the folks observing it through thermals characterized as a cube or a big square materialize only on the thermal, not visible to the naked eye, but visible to their thermal recorders. And they sort of miss the initial appearance of the thing, and it's disappearing by the time they get a second higher quality thermal pointed at it and recording. But they guide one team down to where this thing has appeared, and a couple of the people on that team actually walk into the area, and they report that it's black, they can't see the stars, it's cold, and the ground is smooth. They hang out there for like 30 seconds to a minute, I think. They come back out, and on the way out, it seems as if the terrain is much more difficult. There are briars and thorns trying to keep them kind of from leaving. And they get out of it, and within 2 years of that night, I think both of the guys that went into that cube had died of cancer. And so that's kind of the big highlight story. There have been many other things there, but anyway, we got the opportunity to go down and spend a week at the location with Trey and ASOG, kind of observing them and observing the area, and turned that into this documentary, the Meadow Project. So, yeah, that's the long and the short of how we got here. Mm-hmm.
Something that I find fascinating is, what makes the Meadow Project unique in my mind is, you think of a place in America like Gettysburg, right? Something that is a place that is captured kind of in, for lack of better words, the American collective conscience, mm-hmm. right? A place that kind of has a dark history, lots of death, lots of paranormal, preternatural activity associated with it. But it almost seems like that's the case by human invention. But here is this meadow that is stumbled upon at a undisclosed location in North America that is not captured in the American collective conscience. And there is, if not more, equal to Gettysburg, strange, high strangeness, paranormal, preternatural activity. And I've been thinking about that, about why that is, about kind of what, Jim, you were saying earlier about these thin places, these thin spaces, these kind of, for lack of better words, these types of thresholds, I guess. Mm-hmm. And I think that is something that makes a place like Skinwalker Ranch, the Meadow, the Beast of Bray Road, all that kind of activity, all those places kind of somehow fit together. But the thing that ties those places together is there isn't a single act in human history, like in American history, that would make these said places the way that they are. Mm-hmm. And I think that's it. I don't know. I would love to hear you guys' thoughts on that and why that is. Because it seems to me like after watching the documentary, there's a lot of measurable data that really does point to these places having a lot of high strange activity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's difficult to know what the interaction is between human attention and intention on a place and what's exhibited by what we, sort of call the phenomena, for lack of having any good word to catch everything. I often have thought that when paranormal investigators of a certain type go to a location and get a lot of activity, how much of the activity is in the location and how much of the activity is on the investigator that's coming. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. I think there's probably, some combination of the two things. I think there is something to place. I think in my original experience with this stuff in Dark Holler, it seemed like there was both. And when they came together, the really weird stuff happened. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, places like this call to people who are interested in it, too. So, in a very, mundane, non-woo way, like someone who wants to have an interaction like this hears that there is a place where that sort of thing can happen. And,
right.
All of a sudden you have Sedona, Arizona.
Right.
So, yeah. I don't know. I think one thing feeds on another. Some of the really weirder, research that one of the interesting patterns that I remember observing with Josh Robinson from during the Dark Holler days, and one that we've kind of kicked around over the years since is tracing lines on significant locations related to these different cases and different phenomena. But you'll find that, say a line from, I think of a good example, but you'd take a line from the Meadow on Google Earth or maps or something and draw it across, say another point of interest from Dark Holler in Kentucky, and then it shoots all the way up and goes across my house. So you're like, okay, what is that? Is that? And of course, given enough points on the map, any lines are going to go across things, and so there's a certain signal to noise thing that you've got to account for. But sometimes it does seem strange, and that's a classic idea of ley lines. And I don't know how much of that is reflective of reality in some way and how much of it is just simply psychological projection. But it wouldn't shock me to find out that it's not entirely psychological projection.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I consider, too, when we are looking at some of the bigger picture questions here, trying to identify, let's say, the historic or even primeval stories and myths and creation accounts and really just stories of gods interacting with people throughout time in any given culture. There is a constant motif of information being given to people who are not the intended recipients for that information. Right. Typically, it can be romanticized over time as secret knowledge or gnosis, any one of those things, or, mystery cults are a dime a dozen. Right. But they all have a through line of some sort of intentionality from one side of this thin space to the other side of the thin space. And that might not necessarily mean like the meadow is in the crosshairs here, but there's a precedent set for the intent to divulge and share experiences, knowledge, power, manipulation, these things. I mean, it's not for nothing that the concept of magic is as old as people are, right? That's always been. And say what you will, again, even not having to go woo into it, but it seems to me like where those are entrenched or enculturated deliberately, and it may be outside of time and scope that we can go back and historically measure it, but there is something that is a common thread in these where there's some sort of spiritual significance, whether that's from, kind of like an earthy shamanism or a very highly organized religious moment where it leaves maybe an aftermath or an after image of some sort, that there is something that does happen that fundamentally weakens or alters that space. Right. And that's where if you really want to go down a rabbit hole, we've talked briefly before about sacred geometry or earthworks and massive structures, all of which you really have to dig your head in the sand deliberately to miss that they are so precise in their alignments and having to interact with the stars and constellations and the movements of the sky, along with seasonal patterns and the way the sun rises and things like this, where the most hard-boiled cynic can say, well, this is either a happy coincidence or it has to do with something that is no longer ours culturally, and so we shouldn't really bother with it. But right. It happens over and over and over again. So I do think there has to be some necessary relationship with that idea of these cultural concepts that are always tied again to enlightenment or elevation or ascension or some sort of sharing from top to bottom and bottom to top that always shows up in this sort of framing. And it may be that we just don't know what that is in any specific instance, but the pattern is there, and these things don't seem to unwittingly participate there. There's some sort of intentionality behind it.
Right. I think something that's interesting about the meadow too, and other places like the meadow, is the symbolism that is associated with these paranormal, preternatural activities is almost always primarily located in kind of the old world. Like we think of mounds, cubes, we think of temples, I was jotting some notes down when I was listening to the documentary, and something that I found interesting was, just off the bat, 3 kind of old world symbols that are really at play in the meadow is like, you think of the meadow, like just right off the bat, and you think, oh, meadow, rivers, water, plants, trees, garden kind of themes. Well, we see ancient cultures trying to replicate that and actually having spiritual experiences in gardens in the old world. And then in the documentary, I think it was, I forget the lady Kristen in the Meadow Project. She's interviewed at one point, and she's discussing her dream that she has. And obviously the dream is more than a dream, because she wakes up the next day with hand marks on her arm. Mm-hmm. And through hypnotic regression, she's able to discover that, there was a witch standing over my bed. And how many times do we see shaman, witchcraft type activity in the old world order? And then kind of to tie it all together, here is this black cube portal-like object that's appearing in the meadow. And think about this. The most prominent religion in the world besides Christianity is Islam. What is the greatest pilgrimage in Islam? A black cube.
Yeah, and there's so much going on with that one.
Yeah, And I think, I mean, so to even tie it to scripture, Revelation 21, the cube descending, heavenly Jerusalem descending in its cube on the earth, I mean, all these types of themes, like you think of the story of the Witch of Endor.
Yeah.
There's this thin kind of this kind of boundary line that's crossed to contact this witch. The Eden is kind of this boundary marker where God and man are able to commune in a sense freely and perfectly before the fall.
Mm-hmm.
And then the temple, where there's boundary markers in the temple itself. You think of the Holy of Holies, right? You cross this threshold in a way that's unworthy in a sense. You're not coming back alive.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting that in the documentary, the two gentlemen who cross into that threshold are no longer alive. And it's just, there's so many old world, old creation, old covenant, pre-Christian themes, I guess, for lack of better words, at play in the Meadow. And I think not only the Meadow has these kind of themes, but these places that are unlike, like I said before, Gettysburg, all kind of have these types of archetypes, these themes that are really at play.
Jim, do you know anything about that's I hadn't thought of the parallel of crossing the threshold unworthily. That's interesting, and it made me think. I don't know. You know more about this than I do, Jim. But are you familiar with the symbol of the black cube in Saturn worship?
Very much so.
Can you explain? Because I could butcher it.
But. Yeah. So the black cube. This is the first thing I thought of when you first sent me what people were talking about when you were there. I cannot hear the phrase black cube and not just have a waterfall of imagery and things that I've read over the years come to mind. There are a few connections that I can think of right off the bat. One is that in a lot of, if you look at imagery, so a cube, just as a form of geometry, it's basically, we could say a square is looking at a cube from a certain angle. And if you took a cube that's upright and tip it at 45 degrees towards you, it is no longer viewed as a cube, but it's a hexagon, six-sided. And if you look all over the world, there are hexagonal symbols in all sorts of ancient carvings. You could argue, a shape or a symbol like the Star of David, which does not show up exclusively in Israel, it's all over the world, is also a depiction of a hexagon. Right. It's almost always shows up in other kind of sacred carvings and artwork that shows a bridge going up and down. I think if you, again, wanted to kind of be overly empirical for its own sake, like you look at like panning out the image of the physics of a black hole. It's kind of like a triangle going up to a focal point and another triangle coming down as an inversion. This imagery is often tied with either Saturn, the deity, or his analogs in various culture. One that I can think of, given that Eli brought up Mecca, one book that I've loved, and it is coming from a deliberately non-supernatural take. It's a book called Hamlet's Mill, which I highly recommend. It's dense, it's very academic, it's an essay by name, but it's about 600 pages, so it's a very grand essay. The two authors put together this argument trying to chart all manner of mythic imagery in order to show that there is clearly like a capture in the ancient mind of really what they would call just like the science of the sky. And that is always tied to these astronomical movements, as I mentioned earlier, like these alignments, all these things. They would say they're encoded into myth. So myth has many different purposes for us. It comes to us, as the aspirations of virtue in many cultures as the ordering of understanding creation. Some would say, it's just fireside imagination and fable. You could look at a spiritual angle that it's almost like a propagandized version of a true story. Like we could take Genesis 1 to 11 and just find it everywhere with the main characters swapped out here and there to make it make sense for their retelling. But Hamlet's Mill is specifically looking at myth as something where it is this astronomical science that if you kind of abstract the physical realities, the mathematical realities, you find them in types and motifs and domains of gods and stories and tropes that keep happening over and over again. And there's an excellent section in the book, and the authors are Giorgio de Santillana and Hertha von Deschend, these two researchers who worked together in the mid-20th century and collaborated on this, and they both kind of have a different take. They unify their voice very well throughout the book. But there is a section that is talking primarily about primordial waters, kind of the idea of the abyss, which is part and parcel of Saturn or Kronos mythology, and I can unpack that shortly. But they even have a reference here in this section where they're talking about the builders of the Kaaba in Mecca, the Kaaba being that black cube. In the interior of that most holy of all shrines, this is what they say, there is a well across the opening of which had been placed in pre-Islamic times a statue of the god Hubal. Another Arab historian, al-Biruni, says that in the early Islamic period, this was a real well where pilgrims could quench their thirst, at least at the time of the Arab pilgrimage. The statue of Hubal has been meant to stop the waters from rising. According to the legends, the same belief had once been current in Jerusalem, hence the holy shard that is referenced earlier in this chapter about David building the capstone for the temple and also finding like a well spring. But Mecca, they go on, tells more. Hildegard Louis points out that in pre-Islamic days, the god Hubal was Saturn, that the holy stone of the Kaaba had the same role, for it was a cube, and hence originally Saturn. Kepler's polyhedron inscribed in the sphere of Saturn is only the last witness of an age-old tradition. That just being a reference to further astronomical understanding of the image of Saturn as a body celestially and also in imagery. The cube is a direct analog to Saturn, and thus the hexagon also. And if you want to get very fascinating with it, I think it was in the early 90s, might have been the late 80s, but there was a probe that went out to Saturn in its orbit in our solar system. And the probe camera pans up to the top of the planet, and there is a gargantuan black hexagon at the North Pole of Saturn. You can just Google it right now. It is buck wild because it is a perfect geometric hexagon, probably half the size of the Earth itself, sitting on top of this planet at the pole. And what's strange, though, is that if you go way back in time to a lot of ancient writings and depictions of the stars, well before we would say there's sophisticated astronomy available to go say, hey, there's a hexagon on top of Saturn, every time Saturn is represented as a planet, as one of the celestial bodies, it's a hexagon. Wow. That's the symbol for the planet, with a different, kind of zodiac adjacent symbol for other planets. But Saturn, the planet, is always the hexagon, which again is the cube flipped at an angle. So that image is rock solid associated with the deity. And to the abyssal comment, like you go to like Hesiod's Theogony, where we get kind of the archetypal Greek story of their creation. Kronos being the Greek Saturn, being just the Roman version. Kronos is kind of the head of the Titans, which are the first generation of gods born out of chaos in the sky and the earth. There's some nuance there, but the operative thing is the first generation of gods are the Titans, and they are later overthrown by their children, who are the Olympian gods. Like Zeus is Kronos' son, and he's saved from a rather grisly moment in the story where Kronos, hearing that there will be some sort of revenge taken upon him, he'll be usurped by his children, doesn't know which, he proceeds to devour most of his children as they are born. The one who escapes and who is actually saved by Kronos' mother, Gaia, the Earth, is Zeus. Long story short, he is equipped by her with a weapon. I believe it's like a silver sickle. And in order to overthrow Kronos, he castrates him, which is, a rather big power play. You castrate your dad. That's really making a statement. But he doesn't kill him. In all these stories, in all the great myths, the gods rarely truly die. They can kill him and they eventually come back somewhere. But they don't. The Olympians don't kill Kronos. They throw him into the abyss. They throw him into Tartarus, which is, the maximum security prison of the underworld. And that is where he and his titans together are imprisoned, presumably, for all time. But so every time a Kronos figure or a Saturn figure shows up in their own mythos, and this could be all over the world with just an analog, a different coat of paint, one of the domains that's associated with Saturn or Kronos is the abyss. And that's not hell, that's not death, it's not the underworld that we may think of. But it is, the Hebrew, it's Sheol, the waters under the earth. It's always this water imagery, it's the abyss imagery, it's the place where they're incarcerated.
Decreation in a sense.
Decreation, sure. Yeah. And so everywhere we see like this deep water imagery, it's usually associated in part with Kronos or Saturn, who is incarcerated there, jailed. Still with influence. I can think of maybe a good modern analog would be like Al Capone running the mob from his jail cell. It's not as they didn't take him out of power. They just throttled his influence, but he persists. And so we have the hexagon, we have the cube, and there are many other examples, but that is absolutely tied to that. And again, the kind of hanging question is, how was it that a bunch of very ancient peoples already knew that the symbol associated with Kronos or Saturn was the hexagon or the cube or the black square? That's a recurring motif. It took us until we could launch a satellite beyond the orbit of Earth and rotate in orbit through the solar system to get a flyby on the planet to go, oh, hey, isn't that interesting? There's a black hexagon at the top of Saturn's pole. How did they know? I would argue it's not much of a stretch to think they just found out by other means, right? Again, there's this sort of intentionality of knowledge, of information. If people are in any given culture or context flirting with the worship of this incarcerated god, he'll be happy to share his calling card with them. And that's going to be encoded by their own effort into their own imagery. And it's full circle.
Wow. Something that I found kind of interesting. First of all, thank you. Sure. Second of all, there is something that I do find interesting that I think correlates to all of this, which is in the documentary itself, one of the researchers in particular is gathered amongst other researchers, and they perform this kind of meditation ritual in the documentary. I forget the exact scientific name for it.
Is it the CE5 thing?
Yes, the CE5. And
which, by the way, preceded Kristen's abduction experience dream.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is...
She participated in CE5, you're saying? Yeah.
Right. I did find that to be interesting.
I'd like to say I'm surprised. But
yeah. Exactly. But something that I found interesting about that, one researcher in particular who had this word come to mind was the word Nox Magby, which was kind of worked through and translated to two different words that are both contemporaneous with each other in Old English to kind of translate into modern English, children of the night.
Yeah, Nox is old, like Latin term for the night goddess, Nox or Nyx, and Magba is old or Middle English, would have been contemporary at the same time in England for children.
Right. And already, I mean, just off the bat, you have some sort of celestial kind of themes already at play just with that word, with the nighttime being one of them, the moon, the stars, the heavens. But something that I found interesting, and I can't take the blame fully for this, but as I was thinking about that word in particular, and the other kind of symbols at play, all of the symbols that are at play in the Meadow in particular are directly associated with, I believe, the Old Covenant world, which is to say, some theologians and scholars have characterized the old world, the Old Covenant order, as the night, the lesser glory, right? The lesser light. And something that I find interesting is the gods of the ancient world really did have a power over the world before the incarnation of our Lord. And when Christ comes, he says, the light has come into the world and men hate the light. And he's talking in context of obviously his not only his mission, but his work. People hate the work of Christ, his mission, the gospel. But I also think, you think of like Psalm 2, there's this kind of concept of the nations, in a sense, offering up some sort of scorn or mockery towards God, because he has set his king in Zion, right? So it's playing into the work and ministry of Christ. But I find it interesting in particular that the new covenant structure, the new covenant, the new world, the new creation is talked about as the light. The light has come, the new creation, the new world, and how Christ's triumphant victory over sin, death, Satan, was also his triumphant victory over these old gods. I find it interesting. There's this Chinese historian, I forget his name, but he lived around the time of Christ, and we have there's been debate about this particular piece, but we can kind of guess that, or estimate that he lived around the time of Christ, but he wrote this kind of paragraph close to the day Christ was actually crucified. And he talks about the old, and we have this in actually Greek historians who lived around the time of Christ as well, but how the people were going to the temples to offer sacrifices, to give up their prostitutes, to offer worship to these old gods, but they weren't responding. And they weren't responding because the sun went dark. Night was overthrown, in a sense. Yeah. The old gods were overthrown. And I find it interesting that, Jim, you just kind of laid out this whole kind of mythic, ancient world kind of conception of Saturn, but also kind of the celestial bodies and how it ties into their worship. But I find it interesting that all of those ancient symbols, like the cube, the black cube, a witch, garden kind of themes and entities, all kind of correlate to this old covenant order, this old world. And so I find that to be really interesting in particular. But I also find, so there was recently, and I sent you guys this, there was recently in Canada, in southern Canada, that was found in a riverbed after there was a huge drought. This was, I think, in 2019, this was found. And I checked to verify this just kind of myself, because I found this to be kind of interesting and kind of a random connection. But the type of language that was used to write Knox, like the word Knox Magny, like the Old English in a sense, was, I believe, the same type of, like it was the same language that was used to inscribe the Lord's Prayer in southern Canada. And so I also think that kind of keys me into something that's interesting, which is there's a lot about the early North Americas that I think in its mythic history that we honestly just don't fully understand.
Yeah.
And I say things like, oh, there's Gettysburg. Everyone knows Gettysburg. But potentially, I mean, we have these burial mounds that the old world, old America had as these sacred spaces and mounds. But I think it is also just potentially the case that this place, the Meadow, was one of those spaces.
Yeah, ASOG might not have been the first CE fivers.
Right.
In the Meadow. Yeah.
Right. And that very likely there could have been something that far predates anyone doing that sort of thing.
Yeah,
right?
that's what I
going
mean.
on. Right,
Yeah.
exactly. Right. Go ahead.
Can I ask is there a feminine archetype that attends the Saturn archetype?
I believe the wife of Kronos, I want to say, is Rhea. I'm going to have to look that up.
Okay.
I know that typically in the stories where Kronos or Saturn or whomever is doing their thing, they tend to be primarily a lone operative.
Yeah.
Usually, you can look at most world pantheons and show, again, these kind of early generations of the gods, and there's always kind of a group of the Titans and then always a group of the Olympian analogs. And almost always it is the Titans in some form who are the ones who are giving knowledge and technology and mysticism and magic. And they are the ones who are imparting the seed which germinates in human culture to be the thing. And that's why we could also see like Prometheus as another Titan, right? And that's probably the other one we know the most about, or at least from a pop culture sense. And right, Prometheus stole fire from the heavens and gave it to humanity, which is just a giant symbol for like, we gave you technology, we gave you stuff to reach above your current station, and he was tortured for it. There's also a suffering knowledge giver archetype and domain all throughout world mythology, where same deal. Usually you pay a big penalty for doing that. You're tipping the hand a little too far forward. But at the same time, there are also moments where the Kronos figure is the one doing that. Enlil, who's the great Sumerian analog for Kronos. And again, very, very similar domain imagery. It has like a bit of creation, but also kind of this netherworld or beyond the veil element to it. There's this very short, very great piece called The Song of the Hoe that comes out of Sumerian tablets. And it's like a 2-page love song about Enlil and his favorite tool, the hoe. And it's this glorious, amazing... I know, there's tons of shit there. Enlil's hoe. But it's actually, like this tilling agricultural tool, and it's like, he's not just digging into the earth and planting literal seeds, but you can see kind of the development of culture. These people that he takes off the earth and says, I'm going to give all this great stuff to you by way of this thing, this tool. Yeah. And the tool is very clearly a divine implement that suddenly jumpstarts his people on earth to thrive and succeed. And that's the other thing too. I mean, I mentioned earlier there is that kind of propaganda element to mythology, and I think that's not the only thing going on, but it's important to consider that depending on what frame of reference you're looking at, it's a very bad thing to give knowledge and power and technology and resource to people who are perhaps not the either intended recipients or they're not yet the intended recipients for it. So it comes too soon. The analogy is like handing a loaded gun to a few toddlers and just find out what happens. Yeah. The person giving that firearm to those children know what will happen, but they don't until it's too late. And that's the punchline. So in terms of a consort figure for Kronos, I know there is one, but nothing that stands out as nearly as pivotal a player as his specific sphere of influence. I would also add that
the other
in many places you get some gender bending across the representation of deity.
Right.
So in some pantheons, this is a goddess, and others it's a god. They're doing the same things despite having a male or female influence. Right. And I would argue too, we tend to think of like the fertility goddess. Well, a lot of times the fertility deity is a guy, right? Like there's a male presentation there. It doesn't have to be just because you're a woman,
right?
And thus there's the womb imagery that has to be where fertility comes from, right? It takes two to tango, even in heaven. So that can be shared in both places.
Right.
So, this gets into, like, I think it's Derek Gilbert's book that you gave me, The Return of Saturn.
The Second Coming of Saturn.
So is Saturn, if we were to map him or that archetype onto a scriptural category, would we see, like, is the Luciferian archetype the, like, bringer of light, which of course is what, grasping after the tree of knowledge of good and evil prior to being ready for it, is that a Saturn pattern, or would we see something more like a, it's not a scriptural figure, but like Semyaza, the Enochian leader of the Watchers, brings that knowledge?
I'm very comfortable at this point to say Semyaza is Saturn. That is a 1-to-1. And so if we're going to say what is the most real, true myth, I would throw my hat in the ring for that Enochian account, mainly because it's Jewish and thus it is close to the original context. Right. And so you have, again, like Azazel being the Watcher parallel to Semyaza, who is the one who all of the Watchers teach things, but Azazel gets the lion's share of saying, like, I'm going to divulge all the stuff. I'm going to teach you how to make weapons. I'm going to teach you how to wage war. I'm going to teach you how to get hot for your, he gives, like, literally it's like, I'm going to show you how to put nice eyeshadow on. Which of course is not mundane. It's meant to convey like actual sexual explicit behavior and fornication and prostitution and like the debasement of sexuality. And so I would, like, to the earlier point, Azazel seems very clear to me as Prometheus, right? That is the same figure, different story, same actors. Wow. But to your point, I think that's interesting because we tend to say, I want to think it's Ezekiel 28 or 32. It's a few chapters in Ezekiel's prophecy and also places in Isaiah that speak to the Lucifer idea, which, for quick context, that's not really even a proper name. That was Jerome's Latin translation of the Bible in the Vulgate. I want to say, I think it's Halal ben Shakar is the Hebrew that means like the light bringer or the glory of the morning, the glory of the light. That is translated into Latin as Lucifer as a term, Lucifer being attached to light. I think historically, the church is of two minds, but predominantly saying that is the Satan figure. But I can also see the argument that is also talking about Semyaza as this usurper who rose above his station, mainly because there's also in those passages of scripture a lot of talk of children and of offspring, and also of like, hey, if you're going to suffer because those prophets are talking to earthly kings and indicting them as though they were like this guy. They're using him as like a moral warning. You will be like this guy who we know, so says the prophets, is now his bed is a worm and he's stuck under the earth with the dead kings of old who are, rattling their bones down there again in this abyssal netherworldly space. That's what you'll be like. And so as much as obviously we put a lot of stock in the influence of Satan and his temptation, rebellion, and fall himself, I would argue you could add some more there to say, like, that was one domino, Semyaza is the other domino coming afterward, who did a different set of depraved, debased rebellion that is more associated with that imagery.
So we wouldn't, I've been curious about this, and but I think I'm going somewhere.
Sure.
Related to the meta. Would we, then we would suggest that if that's true, if we're talking about two different entities, there's a Semyaza figure, and then there's the Satan, the Nakash in the garden. Is the Satan figure or is the Semyaza figure?
No, I think that is the Satan figure.
Okay.
Yeah, that is the serpent. And I think, too, because you mentioned Nahash Saraf being, like kind of the burnished, flaming serpent, which we see elsewhere in Scripture. It's not like it's a proper noun, it's just a descriptor. We don't know a lot about the deep dive on biblical angelology, but there's enough there to know there are some categories, and a seraph is not the same as a cherub. They're different. They have different roles, but probably the same sort of thing, being-wise, but they have different functions. Both related to the close proximity to God's throne room, but the seraph is more of the worship leader, almost. Isaiah sees the seraphim, and they are the ones who are singing around God's throne, whereas God does not send a seraph to cut off humanity from the garden. He sends a cherub. And then in Isaiah and Ezekiel, in this same passages I'm referencing, it's referred to as a cherub there, which is, not a make or break, but I think that's enough to warrant, we are talking about two different things.
Right.
I wonder if because the offer of knowledge occurs in both instances.
Right.
And one of I think I'm getting this from James Jordan, but I wonder if that's almost sort of the role that the Nakash in the garden should have had, was to be like a paraclete, to be like a
guide.
Yes. To be sort of an intermediary
Guardian.
a guardian. Leading man correctly.
Sure.
And then in the fall,
he grabs the reins by it. Engages in the project on his own terms.
Right. Because this dirtbag creature is going to rule over what now?
Right.
And then there's an interesting... Christ is pictured as the Son of Righteousness, which rises with healing in his wings. He's, in a true sense, brings light to humanity, takes over. In the new covenant, we are not mediated to by angels. We are mediated to by Christ. So there's this I don't know. I wonder about that. If there's this inversion of, the failed guide, the failed original intermediary, which puts an interesting color on interactions between Christ and Satan in the temptation.
I think that's an absolute through line. Right. He's still saying, hey, I know you will get all of this, but do you want it right now? Do you want it on your own terms?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what Gnosticism is. It's not actually secret knowledge. It's knowledge out there somewhere. It's not like he's making it up. It's, do you want it now? Do you want it without initiation? Do you want it without preparation? Do you want it, in fact, so that you can lord it over other people who do not have it themselves?
Right.
Right. I mean, we think about, from a covenantal perspective, Eden was always probationary. It was never meant to be just Eden forever. Right. God wanted, through the delegation of his authority to Adam, to go to that tree of knowledge and good and evil and make the right judgment, to actually know good and evil correctly and reject that temptation. It's not as though God was going to lord that fruit, whatever it was, over Adam for the rest of time. Yep. Be like, bet you want to take a bite, don't you? No, that wasn't. It was never. It wasn't like a gotcha trap. Right. And I know the more cynical among us could say that. Well, how cruel of God to not reveal what he wants. Well, he also wants us to grow up and participate and do our part. Yeah. He doesn't need any of us to do any of this. Right. So it's his design to reveal in time what is good.
That is the accusation that the devil makes in both temptations, in the temptation of Christ as well, because if Christ doesn't go through the cross as man, then it's basically like admit say, like, admit that you were wrong in the first place. Admit that you hung this out there for man and the test wasn't fair. Admit that I was right in what I said all the way back there in the garden.
Yeah. And I think as a worthy tie-in back to what we were, originally sussing out here with the Meadow and that sort of investigation, that's the danger of this always, because I think you said, like, it's right for us to desire the transcendent. That is built into us. We can't help it. That's why so many of us do it poorly, because we are groping after something that has a right ordering. And in our corruption, we desire to shortcut as much as possible. Can I skip a few steps and go straight to perfection? I mean, I think even that from a Christian perspective, like in sanctification, I would like to be more holy than I am, but sanctification is not God booping me on the nose and saying, you are now holy. He's like, I'm going to send you through the ringer, because that's the only way you learn and experience the actual growth that comes through pain in this sin-struck world, to be the best version of yourself, to improve and to be more like Christ. And even that, the promise is like, hey, it's not done until you're on the other side of glory. You can't attain it perfectly here, which again is the impulse of like, but I do. I want to have my cake and eat it too. I want to be my little God king here on this side of the veil, with all the trappings and all the power and all the majesty and all the knowledge and all the wisdom. And I don't want it on your terms. I want it now. It's really just a Willy Wonka moment there.
Quick question. This has kind of got my gears turning a little bit. I would be curious to hear your guys' kind of thoughts on. So you said that. Well, I guess Jim, you were actually the one that said this. You were kind of positing, if I'm correct, that the fallen being in Ezekiel is a different being than Satan in the garden.
I think so. I think there's at least a case to be made.
Do you, and you would include like Lucifer, Satan, and this other being as in a word you mentioned this kind of potential former guardians or watchers. Would you both say that that's true?
Yeah, watcher is a tricky term because it doesn't have a super specific meaning. It's almost like a class or category.
Right.
It's more of a categorical name of like all of those divine angels, those supernatural beings, the celestial, whatever you want to call them. They all, again, it's all the language for the nomenclature of spiritual beings is like job title more than anything else.
Right.
And it seems to be that the watchers are specifically invested in almost like spiritual governors.
Right.
Like there are people living down here as a nation, and they've got an overseer. It's like the mayor of Persia, spiritually speaking, is whatever the prince of Persia is. Not the cool platforming game, but this designation of like power and influence, which is why, you mentioned Psalm 2 with, Christ will rise up and inherit the nations. That's why it's so powerful in a messianic sense. Once we get to the Tower of Babel, we don't have nations until then. It's after that confusion of language. This Ward and I have talked about this in the past of Deuteronomy 32 is Moses' commentary on Babel. And he's saying there, ask the elders, remember the days of old. Here's the passage. Consider the years of many generations. Ask your father, and he'll show you. When the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance, when he divided mankind, he fixed the borders of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God. But the Lord's portion is his people, Jacob his allotted heritage. So in that nation moment, you think about it like Eden, okay, humanity, you're going to have perfect dominion, strike one. Nope. The flood, the world, basically went to hell and back in metaphorical terms, strike two. That didn't work either. After the flood, yet another reset. Still, go forth and multiply and spread across the earth, do my will. Oh, you're not going to do that? In fact, you're going to stay in one place and have this collaborative glory fest for yourselves? Right. Strike three, you're out. So now he disinherits those nations.
Yep. Right.
And puts these sons of God over them. These are the watchers. Right. I think that's the easiest through line there is like whatever they are, their job is to basically babysit the nations until Christ, as you said, comes in time and then gathers the nations again.
Right.
That's why nations comes up so much. It's not just a designation of demographics.
Yes.
It's a spiritual concept. It's a covenantal concept.
Right.
Which, to your point, the old covenant is that world.
Right.
Absolutely. Where there's actual dominion in a, let's say, a political sense over this place over here.
Yes.
And it's not God's project.
Yep.
He's given up on them in his forbearance, and he says, I'll come back to you guys later when my Redeemer comes for everybody.
Right.
For now, between Babel and the Ascension, everybody else is somebody else's business.
Right.
They've been disinherited. They are now, only a third-party mediator gets to come and talk to God.
So on the flip side of that, this is kind of something that my mind was thinking through. So, and people have different understandings and interpretations of Michael and Gabriel. Kind of as, most kind of categorize them as, in the angelic hierarchy, as two of the primary guardians, kind of God sets to oversee his affairs in regard to humanity. And so, do you think it's, this is kind of more of a question than it is a thought. Do you think it's possible then? Because in the temptation, you said something that was interesting, which was in the temptation of Jesus, both of the fallen angelic creatures and obviously Satan and you guys use the name Azazel, yes. Both of the temptations relate to both of those figures in a sense. Do you think it's possible that so this, when Satan quotes the psalm, like you will fall in, his angels will bear you up, lest you smash your foot against the stone. Do you think it's possible that, and even after the temptation of Jesus, we're told that angels came to minister to him, plural. Do you think it's possible that the angels that were ministering to Christ after that were Michael and Gabriel, as kind of this culmination in the old covenant world, as like Christ has now passed through the temptation and the guardianship is being almost given in a sense to the second Adam, as it would have been.
Like the baton being passed back to the first runner. Yeah,
like you see what I'm saying? Like in a sense, the council, this hierarchy, this angelic hierarchy consisted of, I would say, probably 4 angelic beings, which is Gabriel, Michael, Lucifer, and Azazel. I'm not even gonna say that word.
Azazel or something. Azazel, one of the two.
Yeah. But those 2 angelic beings become corrupt in their purpose and distort God's original intent, and so do you think it's possible that on the flip side of that, the 2 angelic beings that are ministering to Christ in that temptation are Michael and Gabriel, and kind of like do you where do you see their role in this whole kind of story?
I know there's a not insignificant Reformed tradition that Michael is pre-incarnate Christ.
Right.
That's interesting because the idea of 4 angels, 4 winds, there's like that's
right.
It is a repeated motif. I don't know. I've never thought about it.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I would be more convinced that what you said, Ward, is like Michael is a
right.
prefiguration of Christ.
Right.
It doesn't have to be. I think that's one of those things like I think there are valid interpretive cases that he could be his own thing.
Right.
He's referred to as well in Daniel as the Prince of Israel. So again, you have that watcher designation, and it's like, well, I mean, if Israel is meant to be inherited as God's specific allotment, would it not make sense that the pre-incarnate Christ is the Prince of Israel because he's going to reveal himself to them in full time? Maybe. Maybe not. But I like the idea, at least in concept form, that you're getting at, where, it's like the old guard is right there waiting to say, hey, here's the moment where you're now going to inherit the nations. That's not just like a switch flips. There's a transfer of power, something like that. I'm not sure. I think it's food for thought.
And I think it's interesting because in the Meadow Project with the helmet, like is it the God helmet or the?
It's colloquially referred to as a God helmet. So it. Hold the thought. Don't lose the thought.
Yeah.
But, it's a device called a wherein helmet developed for the purposes of engendering religious experience via manipulating the mind through EMF.
Right.
So you put this helmet on, and it seeks to utilizing electromagnetic pulses to synchronize the left and the right hemisphere of the brain, unify brain activity, and then wash the part of the brain responsible for religious experience with, flood it with EMF to try and stimulate something. Yeah.
Well, I find it interesting that in the photos that are captured from that kind of device, the gentleman who's analyzing the photos says something that really stuck with me, which was, when these angels were cast out of heaven and they felt like lightning, you almost, this type of device is almost tapping into that kind of that experience for those beings, and you kind of see it in the the image that I'm in particular referring to is the image of the faces, and how most of almost all the faces, the thing that they all have in common is they look distraught, and the war in heaven is being waged, and they fall from heaven, and there's this distraught kind of nature to that. I find it interesting that the angelic, it's obviously God who is victorious over these demonic powers, but there is a place for the righteous angels to kind of participate in this war, especially in the pre-incarnate world. And so I find it interesting that at a place that is so tapped into the old world, with these ancient symbols, you have kind of images that are captured by this device that are, in a sense, tapping into that kind of moment, and potentially that moment. And so that's kind of what made me think about the Michael and Gabriel aspect of the temptation of Christ, and other aspects where there was this kind of, in a sense, if the old covenant was mediated to us by angels, Christ is the God-man. He comes in the night, and so he comes into the world where it is still being mediated by angels. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. He goes through this temptation, and I almost wonder that's what gets me thinking. Where is the righteous angelic participation in this moment? And I think it's when we think about the angelic hierarchy, Azazel, or however you pronounce that word, I'm just going to struggle with it all night. And Lucifer, they have a role in that cosmic war. And in the scriptures, we have Gabriel and Michael. Obviously, Michael could be a prefigurement of Christ. But regardless, I think it's interesting that the whole Meadow Project kind of taps into that, but also kind of zooming into the world that we live in, post Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Like, where is that moment in the life of Christ where the the guardianship is completed, and we now, like, God has given all of, like obviously in the ascension, Christ has given all authority in heaven and earth.
Yeah, it's like Psalm 110, right?
Right.
Is ascension and being given the nations. This is inheritance, I would say.
Right.
That's what the moment looks like in heaven.
Right.
We have the harrowing of hell as well.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And Peter talks, after Christ is interred, he descends down to that abyss, lets all of the redeemed out the front door, and then chastises everybody who he doesn't let out, right? And he's talking to these prisoners.
Right,
he's like, sorry, guys, you lost.
Right.
I know you've been waiting for the shoe to drop. Well, here it is. I've got it in my hand.
Boom.
So there is that moment that is a clear indicator of, like, there's that consummation of that messianic promise in that spiritual sense.
Right.
Okay, now, as of this moment, no more nations. You guys, you're done.
I also don't know that it might be slightly incorrect to envision it as a punctiliar moment in time.
Sure.
Because there is this from, not to go all preterist on you, but like there is a stretching over from Christ's death and resurrection and ascension to the destruction of the temple, where it's like the first creation is being decreated in the symbolic garden that is the temple. That's where you go connect with God. That's being destroyed so that it can't be accessed anymore.
Right.
Like the writer of the Hebrews is talking about, like, it, the whole thing's ending. There's nothing to go back to.
It was
like
planned obsolescence.
Yeah. So literally there's going to be nothing to go back to. Yeah. I'm sorry if that was a bit of a tangent, but I do.
No, it's interesting to think about.
I find it interesting because the whole Meadow Project, I think, does tap into that concept of the cosmic war that's been won by Christ, but also the war that kind of is still being waged.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how to say this, but three people lost their lives. As a result, potentially, of their interactions with the Meadow. Yeah. And in some sense, the Meadow kind of gives us a glimpse into that, into the ancient world, but also into the world that Christ has ushered in, and the victory he secured.
Well, I think, there are many analogies we could use, but it speaks in many ways to, we have the Titans, these OG rebel angels, they're locked up. Right. They're out of the picture.
Right.
Their influence is still prevalent, but they are no longer main players. We have a lot of these other gods of the nations who are disarmed in the language of Scripture by Christ. He disarms the powers and the principalities. Right. Again, it's all linked to this new covenant. The nations are open now.
Right.
But we also don't see, he triumphs over them, which is that Roman imagery of, tying up your conquered enemies behind a chariot and racing them through the city square to be like, guess who didn't win? Those guys.
Right.
But there's also, and this is something that's still an ongoing question in my mind, is what does happen to them, though? Like, are they toast? I don't think they are, because we still see so much malevolence, spiritually speaking, active in the world.
Right.
But it's like they don't have a home base anymore, right? They're disinherited again in this manner. And so, like, are they rogue agents? I remember years ago in the Sword and Staff Discord when Dark Hauler was still in process, and we were talking a lot about Kukumthina, who was the Shawnee goddess, right? Who's kind of the grandmother crone, very much like the hag archetype.
Right.
And I had found some ridiculous gif that came out of like some Muppet film, and it was like this, crazed looking elderly woman who's in this bird suit, just like flying with this insane look on her face. And I had captioned something like, after Babel, Cocumthena gunning it to West Virginia. That's she was doing something else in the ancient Near East and then got booted out, and so it's like, okay, well, I got to go find somewhere else to go. But that's an ongoing question in my mind: is like, what is the reality and time of these other actors, and would it not make sense that they're going to go wherever the beacons are lit, as it were? So you've got these places that are already given over to occultism, entrenched paganism, active abuse of the world, both spiritually and physically. Well, hey, that's like a big magnet for this sort of thing. Kind of misery loves company, and so it shouldn't be surprising. In the same way, where that you said earlier, it tends to be the people who want to dabble are going to go to the places where they know dabbling can be done. It's a reality out there to go stumble on and go invest yourself into. It's not good for you, to be sure, but it seems to be like a natural flow of things if you're looking for it.
Yeah.
But as a side note, she did fly to Stowe, Ohio first, and in a straight line from Stowe, she flew to West Virginia. So that is I want to add that. So.
Well, there are more Liliths than one. But two things, if I can remember them while I talk about, if I can remember the second while I try and talk about the first. It's interesting that, I've observed this before, but these, possibly the fact that you sort of have to go out into the wilderness and find this absolutely middle of nowhere location where manifestations of this kind of power are still active, like, is itself probably testament to the restriction of those entities. Like, it's no longer,
it's a back alley deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Bray Road.
Not to say that, obviously there are still, child sacrifice rituals.
Right.
That are quite popular and mainstream, but they at least have to be known by other names. And the second thing is, so the gentleman who analyzed in the Corin helmet, the God helmet thing, that occurs in the special feature called the Hellman lens. And the gentleman who analyzed some images of Sean, who was in the God helmet doing the God helmet session, he does quantum image analysis, which is beyond my capacity to explain, but suffice to say that I've seen enough of his work that I believe there is information that travels in images that is not visible information, that has nothing to do with what you can see in it, even if you filter it or Photoshop it or whatever. There's information about what happens in and around the moment that the image is taken that travels with the image via a channel we don't understand. And that channel has to do with quantum mechanics in some way. And anyway, this guy who has done work for like the Department of Defense, what he's done is legit, I think. And a lot of what he's seen, he's interpreted as seeing the constrained, imprisoned sons of God. He said he sees a lot of, there are almost always faces that come out of UFOs or different phenomena. The faces are never happy. And in multiple occasions, they're sort of, he describes them as being like restrained by guitar strings or like clear glass bonds that are kind of like pinning them to the surface of whatever it is that's, manifesting the quantum information that's rendering itself as this facial pattern. So Yeah, he's convinced that what he's looking at when he pulls a UFO image or an orb image or an image of someone experiencing something and then he gets all of these facial constructs. He calls them cranio-maxillofacial constructs. It just means the appearance of a face, something that appears to be a head and a face. When he gets them back, that's what he's saying, and that's how he interprets it, actually.
Right.
So, yeah, I don't know that, is it possible that what he's seeing, what we're seeing in something like a UFO encounter, an orb or something like that, is a manifestation of limited bound power by creatures that are imprisoned? I don't know, but
there are about 4,000 rabbit trails you can go down with this. And
Yeah.
the one that comes to mind immediately, especially pertinent to the documentary and the use of the God helmet, which kids at home, please don't put the God helmet on.
no.
Do not.
Here's the thing, it's easy to look at that and be like, oh wow, if I just manipulate my brain chemistry, I can totally see like gray aliens hanging out with me in a pop-up tent in the woods. And you know what? Yes, you can.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. Yes, you can. Like, it is very clear, not just looking at ancient esoterica, but frankly, like, go to a DMT dispensary and
Walmart.
you're there. Like, here's the thing. Like, we have the equipment to do it. And I think this, again, goes back to the operative statement of, like, the Genesis 3 narrative. We have all of the moving parts to interact in a far more fully orbed way with the spiritual in real time.
Right.
In God's grace, he said, A, you're not ready for that. And B, after a certain time, I think you will be. And I look forward to making that happen. It's a reality. It's a true paradigm. And all of these means are cheat codes. You plug in the Game Shark and hit a few buttons, and all of a sudden, you can hang out with things that, you look at most accounts of people who are on psychedelic trips, and, where do you find there? You find entities who are like, hey, I'd love to tell you all about this stuff. Do you want to be enlightened? I got enlightenment for days. Also, I'm a giant fractal jester, and that's awesome, right? You like clowns?
Exactly.
But in equal number of times, as I've read a lot of, quote, psychonaut trips, where people are deliberately going to these places, just as often as somebody is there with a handshake and a cup of coffee, they're like, what the heck are you doing here? There's always like this feeling of antipathy or antagonism or you're not supposed to be here. And I would argue that probably most of the things on the other side of whatever that veil is are not good actors. That's probably the place where they're, shacked up right now. But the same thing with the God helmet, it's just one of many means to actually use the mechanisms that are there, but are currently switched off on purpose, right? So yes, is there enlightenment and a higher level of living? I don't doubt it for a second. It's also not at all what the doctor ordered, right? And so I think this has to be grounded in a tremendous amount of care and discernment. I know, Ward, before you went out there, you and I had many conversations about this, and you, I think, rightly expressed your trepidation of like, what do I do when the guy puts a helmet on? Because I know he's going to, and I think it's a bad idea, and I think you're right that it's a bad idea. And I think the danger of being overly empirical and clinical about an investigation like this, like the Meadow Project, is that it runs the risk of assuming if we just do it in a controlled environment, it's totally safe.
Yeah, what's control?
And we can just take some measurements and form a hypothesis and, write a research paper on it. And you can do that. But I think you're touching a live wire in doing so. And maybe that's what these thin liminal places are. It's like the spark is there. You just have to reach out and touch it. But if you walk inside of the black cube in the middle of the field, that's not a good outcome for you.
No.
And I don't care to speculate over much on the fate of those gentlemen who did that. Like, okay, everybody dies. I'm not going to say it's a one-to-one, but I would argue, and I say this without trying to be trite, if you capture a unexplained black cube on your camera, you should probably get in your car and drive away.
Yes.
You should not go over and touch it or walk into it. The fact that you can't see it except by basically arcane means, which in this case is an IR camera, is like, that's probably not something we're supposed to tango with.
Yeah.
So every time, I think the more I've been in this space over the years and seeing well-intentioned exploration into these things, I don't deny that it's fascinating. And I think it's a testament to the greater spiritual reality in which we live. We shouldn't deny it. But man, a 10-foot pole is not long enough to reach out and touch it.
No.
Don't do that.
Right.
Again, I don't say that to be dismissive or belittle it, but I think the intent to go on these experiential investigations, they're excellent. And I think there should be a much more orthodox Christian voice speaking into them. And I'm grateful, Ward, for what you do. And I know that you take it with great care. But I also, in that same breath, say, like, I'm glad that you say, hey, can we hash it out before I get there? Because that guy is going to say, Ward, put this helmet on. I'm going to massage your EMF brain chemistry so that you can talk to the entities that we know are here. And so again, on the one hand, the most hard-boiled person says, well, that's ridiculous. There are no entities out there. Right. I'd say, you're living under a rock, man. Yeah. Yes, there are.
Yes.
But, every time you look at folklore, outside of rare edge cases when a deity or a figure of power is surrounded by their helpers, which, ironically enough, especially in the Americas, are like the big hairy guy who lives in the woods, or the lights in the sky, or the orbs that dance like the will-o-wisps. Those aren't friendly figures.
Right.
We want to look at them because they're shiny, and we should understand what they are. But please don't go touch one or do the CE5 thing and invite them in. Because again, I think there are certain levels of opacity that are meant to stay opaque. Right. You shouldn't be able to see through that dark glass clearly because what you find on the other side wants to kill you.
Yeah. I think this could kind of come full circle with the grasping out of time thing. We know that it is our destiny to judge these things.
Right.
And that part of getting there is the suffering of a lifetime, right? Is the sanctification that occurs over a lifetime that leads you to be the kind of thing, the glorified thing that can join God's counsel and issue judgment over these things. And so I think that's that could be a helpful way of looking at this, that it's not one day we will very likely see that realm, and not only see it, but be called upon to discern clearly, to know good and evil, to judge good and evil in that realm, to judge these things. And seeing them out of time before you have the sanctification and the maturity to do that leads you to that deception.
Makes you vulnerable.
Yeah.
It's a cosmic war, not a petting zoo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's essentially it.
And that's another thing I think is always a useful warning in any of these exploratory moments, or even just the bigger picture, is Paul does say our battle is not against flesh and blood, it is against the powers and principalities. But Paul also doesn't say, go kick down the door and take the war to the powers and the principalities. It's Christ who disarms them. It's Christ who has the ultimate victory. It's Christ who goes in our stead as our king to stand between us and those things. Like nowhere are we given the command, go and kill the fallen angels.
Right.
Ironically, the command is you will judge those angels. Yeah. And that is authority that's delegated to us for a specific context. So, I mean, any red-blooded Christian male should want to desire to go shout imprecatory psalms while standing on a serpent mound. There's something enchanting about that. But at the same time, that's not what we're commanded to do. Right. And we're probably asking a bit beyond our reach when we go and do it.
Jim, have you played Doom? Have you played Doom?
Doom
I
is
want to
great.
unload my clip onto the
Doom is,
serpent mound.
the Doom Slayer, there's something magical about that. I mean, you overlay the Doom music on anything, and you're like, I am ready. I am ready for it. Yeah,
Run to a wall.
There's no denying there. I'm going to shoot that cacodemon in the face with a plasma torch. But
You know how the Columbine shooters made a Doom mod to practice Columbine?
yeah,
Yeah, we need to make a Doom mod that's Serpent Mound. And it plays
Unload magazine.
and the song is Antioch 277.
I'm going to clip through the wall of the Serpent Mound into Tartarus. That's the secret boss level. But again, I think, it's wisdom is hard work. Wisdom is not easy. If the world truly were just black and white, we would have nothing to do because the answer is obvious. So it's like with more nuance and articulation of our role and of the larger nature of the world and the world to come, most of which is still rather clouded for us weaklings here. As you said, the smooth brains among us, spiritually and otherwise. The more we learn about it, the more it is interesting because it's telling more about the true story of the way things work. But we have to stay in our lane. And I don't say that as, a pessimist or a coward. I'm like, personally, I would not like to go and face down Kronos in Tartarus. Like, that is above my pay grade. Right. I'm glad that I have the God of all creation to do that for me and that he says he will. Right. I think of Revelation where, the pit is opened at long last. And you've got the figure of Abaddon or Apollyon is, I think, also Semyaza by yet another name. And Jesus Christ unlocks the door and he's like, hey, come on out. The weather's great. And then he's just instantly obliterated at the end of time. It's like, you waited all this time. You really thought you had a chance,
Seriously.
But it's certainly not Jim who's standing there with the keys to Tartarus, unlocking the gate, which reminds me, did you guys ever read those Christian kids adventure books? I think it was the Cooper Kids Mysteries.
Frank
Peretti's Cooper Kids, yeah. There's the one, The Door in the Dragon's Throat, where the kid just finds the actual key to the gate to hell under Baghdad.
It's typical.
I had nightmares forever reading that book. I'm like, what if I found that key? I'm like, thank God, literally, I cannot find it. It's not my business.
Yes.
I can't even know where that key is. It's not mine to touch.
Right.
I loved those books.
Those
I
were
loved
great.
Frank Peretti as a kid.
I mean, Frank Peretti's, he was good at what he did.
Right.
Yeah, Cooper Kids. We could do a whole episode just unpacking it. What's the mytho-historical reality of the Cooper Kids mysteries?
There was an Anakim one.
There was. Yeah.
The Tombs of Anak. It was
The Tombs of Anak.
Wow.
Yeah, right. I mean, he knew his stuff. But, that is, and so it's like, okay, I'm going to assess the Meadow Project from my lens. It's good to go there and to investigate this stuff. And again, to build a body of credence to say, this is a real thing.
Right.
It's not fake. The thousands and thousands of people across all cultures at all times who brush up against this stuff are not lying.
Yeah.
But it's also not really appropriate to go and try and say, hey, I found the veil, I'm going to step onto the other side.
Yeah.
Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Right.
Right? I mean, Paul wasn't joking when he's like, all things are permissible, not all things are beneficial.
Right.
As much as that could be just a, whitewash blank check to cash in on any decision making.
Right.
Like, pretty sure this is the same guy who was also just talking about the powers and the principalities.
Exactly.
Context is king, all right?
Yeah.
Like, it applies there, and we should be very wary. So, yeah, like I'm all for, I'm still waiting for Joel Thomas to go punch Bigfoot. He's going to do it one day. He's going to find him, and he's going to knock his lights out in the woods. But, I'm also grateful that Joel knows not to, go on a DMT trip on a serpent mound to find Bigfoot and wrestle him to the ground. That's not the right way to do it.
No.
Which I think it's also worth noting, Ward, the close of the Meadow Project documentary is that difficult investigation and reinvestigation of did we actually see Bigfoot out there on the tree? And I might pivot over to you to unpack that for us since you were actually there, and I think your angst in that moment comes through.
Yeah, it was a weird thing. I think that from the beginning was his perceptions were being affected. So the first kind of strange thing that happened when we were down there is that we were standing around getting a safety briefing, and Joel's perceptions of like 4 people's faces as we're standing around were that their faces were sort of like melting or their countenances were falling. The way he described it, I sort of envisioned there's a Stephen King book and HBO series called The Outsider, where this creature like takes on different identities, and in between identities his face is like drooping and falling apart. And that's kind of what I envisioned him talking about. So that happened early on in the week, and then toward the end of it, he had come to us at one point and try to recount the whole story. You can watch the documentary, but he thought that he had seen a Sasquatch, like a hairy humanoid figure, seated on a log. And he had taken note of it and tried to get it on camera, and then thought, I'm going to move a few yards past and then come back and look. And if it's changed position, then it'll have been something. And if it's still there, then it won't be. And so he tried to do that, and he didn't see it when he came back. And so he thought it might have seen something. And so it very much on camera, when we went to review it, it looks like the silhouette of a Sasquatch sitting there.
Yeah, I agree when I saw it.
Yeah,
And,
same, yeah.
But the thing that he kept saying was that it was furry, hairy. Kept saying it over and over again. And the one thing that you don't see when you look at it, and the thing that I didn't see up there, the silhouette's correct, but the one thing I would not have said was anything about hair or fur. It was definitely a hard outline. And I can't remember if I thought this in the moment that we sort of debunked it. We went up the next day and recreated where he had stood and discovered that it was in fact there, and it was a tree that was shaped to look a lot like a Sasquatch looking down the hill. And I don't remember if I thought this then or if it came to me afterward, but it wouldn't have taken very much if you just were to sort of be able to paint behind my eyeballs and just draw some hair on that thing, make it move just a little bit, like just color my perceptions just a little bit. I could have seen exactly what Joel described.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then so we ended up debunking it and leaving, and we ended up staying at an Airbnb after, and everyone was pretty impressed that what we thought we had found we had seen we didn't see. But the next morning, I come out to the car, and there are like big, muddy, like very muddy, like someone had stuck their hands in, like caked them in mud, handprints all over the rental car that I had driven. And there was also sort of a mark on the back that was like something furry had dragged across it, that was also muddy. Or maybe, and I didn't think of this at the time, it sort of was like if you've ever seen where a bird flies into a window, like its wing smacks it, kind of like that. Yeah.
I've seen a raven do that.
Oh, yeah, I know you have.
And yeah, I don't know. So that was, and none of us were that muddy. And I think there were doors that it had touched that I hadn't even opened. It was like on all 4 doors of the truck.
It was all around the exterior.
Yeah. And that was after a day of no sleep. So like you guys were not like opening a bunch of doors. You got to the Airbnb and just crashed.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know what that was. It felt like it's whatever. It felt like a taunt of sorts to be like, oh, you you like fur, huh? But yeah, I don't know. what to make of that.
Well, I think there was a statement that I believe you made at the end of that, assessing it, of like you would, as a group and individually, assess that there was absolutely interaction with a non-human intelligence throughout that expedition.
Yeah.
And I think the word trickster was in there somewhere, right? And I mean, we shouldn't be really surprised with that as part of kind of the calling card of any sort of place like this.
Right.
I mean, we've talked about before where, as much as it's maybe an overly aggressive shorthand, but the spiritual warfare is deception. It's keeping you off balance and stringing you along to demoralize you and to keep you guessing and to, you know, instill some sort of dissonance in your experience. And that's very much how that comes across. You know, with that emotional investment and your exhaustion and all of these elements that are catalytic to each other, ramping you up and then coming to nothing, which is itself a like kind of a punch to the gut. And then after the fact, be like, by the way, here's, you know, a very compelling moment of some unexplained thing that matches what you were looking for. Right. See ya.
Yeah.
Right. That's exactly.
Like you said, like a taunt. And maybe we can't really say that, but it's compelling.
I think, like, it's almost like if it had just left alone at that point, it would have been more demoralizing, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it would have been like, well, absolutely not, you know.
Right.
The only thing we thought we saw, we were just idiots. Like, and so, yeah, part of it seems like a taunt, and part of it seems like sort of a like, oh wait, there's still something more you could, yeah.
But that is, I think, what is the most interesting to me is exactly that of like, oh, maybe we should go back.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe. Let's do this again in a year and see. It's like there is. You've talked about this a lot when Dark Holler was rapping board, but you know that it's that, for lack of a better term, the intoxication of the unknown. Of like, man, what if I just try it one more time? Mm-hmm. It's a mind worm. It sticks there, and again, I think there is a safe and mature way to go about pursuing that. But it's feeding at our base desire, which is like, oh, what if I could just figure it out, though?
Yeah.
I think, you know, the desire would always be like, I want you to come back and walk into my cube.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's
still out here. You know how to find it. I'll even put a hairy guy outside, so lure you in. You know, it's like the, you know, spiritual anglerfish there.
How many guys were at that cabin? Just out of curiosity.
At the Airbnb?
Yeah. 2 or 3?
5
okay.
total.
Okay.
I was the only one in that had anything in that truck.
Okay.
And nobody was that dirty.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, yeah,
I asked that for a different reason. I was this idea came up to me a couple times. I just was thinking about it, which was, I mean, we're on the topic of symbols and
6. I'm sorry.
Witnesses.
6.
Well, I was thinking, okay, so 6, okay. Because the interesting thing to me was, like, you have, like, 2 and, like, really 2 or 3, something is established by 2 or 3 witnesses.
Yeah.
2 or 3 people die who enter into this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And, like, something is established. And then I thought it was interesting that in the documentary, I only saw 2 or 3 people who went to go check out to replicate the. But there might have been 6. I don't know how many people went to go see the the branch.
There were 6 of us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I was curious if there's any correlation there, because I was like, I wonder, like, I would just wonder, like, if there was a desire, almost a motive for, like, a continual, like, kind of like intoxication by like, let's keep us building this thing, like establishing this, like, case that.
Yeah.
Like, that's so that we can get more people to walk to this cube.
Yeah, I've thought about that. I mean...
Because numbers, numbers are symbols.
Yeah.
not just symbols, but they are they are symbols.
6 people. It's a hexagon.
There it is.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I wasn't trying to read too much into that, but at the same time, I just was curious because I.
No, I don't mean to
The
totally
next
dismiss it
Merkel
either.
Media Project is going to the polar cap of Saturn.
Yeah, boys driving
Spacesuits. It takes, 8 years or something to arrive?
Day of completion.
8 years minus 2 is 6.
Minus 2 for the 2 witnesses.
Now at a year of Jubilee.
I've often thought about, and this is a live question for me too, about the ethics of doing stories like this, because it is fascinating, and yeah, like I mean that is very much a live question, and it's not. I don't see myself doing this forever. Yeah, I mean before.
I mean, you're gonna judge him one day, so you won't be doing that. That's for sure. Bigfoot, yeah, you're gone. Get out of here. Get this guy out of
Put
here.
that cube on trial.
Yeah.
The before the most recent, like what may become Dark Holler 2, the Kentucky thing I've told you guys about. Before that, like I was pretty seriously contemplating. Yeah, because I don't know if like I feel like it's kind of. I don't know what too much more there is to gain by just doing other places and being like, yeah, this was weird here and that was weird there, and
I think there's more to what you're doing though than just pointing out a weird place.
yeah, hopefully,
because in a sense you're engaging a part. So there's a whole. I mean, I know you don't like this word because it's weird, but there's a whole industry of this kind of thing. And if anything, you're right now, like God has given you a, for lack of better words, a ministry to this industry, to these types of people.
At least some voice of reason. But that also is a testament that stands even if it doesn't keep going.
That's true.
But it's food for thought, right? Like what is, if we are trying to also frame it like you don't want to go too far when you do this sort of thing, then is there only so much that can be done or should be? And that's fine. I mean, I think, as you said, Ward, it's a live question. But thus far we have a few sincerely thought-provoking and compelling docuseries out there, at least a few jaunts, that do add something to the conversation, and I think offer at least some inflection point of a different perspective in, a long series of bad Ghost Hunters episodes.
Right.
yeah. Well,
We can collab with Zach Baggins next time. He's probably still got the Dybbuk box somewhere. Maybe it's a Dybbuk cube, actually. That's the full circle. Just add as many geometric terms as we can at this point.
a cube is also a cross folded up.
Isn't that wild? When you unfold over the like the tesseract, the cube within the cube.
Wow. Yeah. It is.
Symbolism, man.
Do you, I was curious about this. Did any of you guys? Did any of you guys experience any, for lack of better words, odd or strange phenomena? I can't think right now. 3 hours of sleep. After the documentary, like, did any of you guys go home? Okay.
Yeah. I know that Tony did. I don't know if he would want me to share that.
Yeah, that's understandable.
But yeah, Tony did, I think, at the same time. That was right in the middle of some other stuff too, so it's hard to like attribute it one way or the other. But I know that frequently when I have gone on these trips or whatever, my children will have nightmares.
Right.
But that actually, we we did a house blessing, and that stopped. So we would, went through the rooms of the house and prayed. The person who had ownership of that space read a psalm over it, and we, sorry, Jim, we anointed. Anointed the thresholds of anything that would serve as a portal with oil. Mm-hmm. So
like doors,
windows, doors, screens, mirrors, all that stuff. So, and that was taken from somebody on the Sword and Staff Discord had taken, it's a very Anglican, it reads like it came out of the Book of Common Prayer, although I don't think it did. It's, yeah. So we did that before the last couple, and it's, that has not happened. So.
Well, part of the reason why I asked too is I think it's part of life as I've lived it is like just figuring out what's I guess, how do I want to phrase this? What story, like what part of the story you're in, I guess, like what in God's work of redemption in the world and life of the saints, where do I fit in the mix of it all? What is my part to play? And it seems like, everything happens by God's providence, right? Every nightmare your children, God has been sovereign over it all. That doesn't mean he literally caused your kids to have nightmares. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that his sovereignty extends over everything. And I have found this to be true in my life to where, it's no accident that I'm here tonight. Mm-hmm. There's no accident that I had the childhood that I had. It's no accident that you're getting a phone call from people in Kentucky. Mm. It's no accident that, like you and Jim meet and discuss these things and become friends. And I randomly stumble across this part of Northeast Ohio and we're here. So I think that's my providence. That's by God's hand. And I often wonder if God sometimes allows us to continue to experience these things to be a means of keeping us active in this front.
Sure.
I guess, for lack of better words.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because in a sense, there's that fine line. Like Jim was like, don't go out searching for black cubes in the middle of the forest and walking in them. But what if a black cube shows up at your front door? Yeah. What if you get a phone call from someone in Kentucky?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you do? As a Christian, do you just, can't do it?
Yeah.
Well, by God's power and spirit, you go and you preach the victory of Christ. And you do it for as long as God gives you opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it answers itself in a sense. How long you should be doing this is how long God has you doing it. Yeah. I know it sounds redundant, but that's kind of that's how most things have happened in my life. Yeah. At least I haven't lived very long, but I have come to terms with that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think there's definitely a shift in approach after these last couple. Mm-hmm. The Meadow one, and then where we went to Wisconsin. And I think we're doing, from here on out, it's going to be much more waiting on God to put something, like the story is going to have to be sort of given to me.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm not looking for them anymore.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if you were before. Technically, like
Well, I mean,
maybe it's to some extent. But
it was just kind of like some of
the
those.
fence at Skinwalker Ranch, maybe, but
Yeah, well, some of those it was just like, here's a weird place. Do you want to go hang out in this weird place? And yes.
Right. There's not a program to it.
Yeah.
You
Right.
just decide to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, where the thing that hangs over me as I watched the Meadow Project, to my great disappointment, is that there is no IMDb review of that documentary.
Rotten Tomatoes.
Where which I can find the 1 star and read it for everybody and promise that person however much money they paid to send it back.
Maybe I'm getting better. Maybe we're getting better.
Maybe you're getting better. You dodge the Expedition Idiots review.
Maybe someone will comment on the podcast.
Yes.
Maybe it's just too new. But I guarantee you I did go look and I couldn't find one.
That's hilarious. Oh man.
Any last words, gentlemen?
I think that's as good a place to end it as any.
Yeah.
Get 8 hours of sleep and don't do cubes.
Yeah. Don't do keeps. This doesn't have to be in the podcast, but the weeks that I was, so this is a weird personal story, I guess. But do you guys remember me sharing before how the upside down crosses were being placed in front of my door?
Yeah.
Well, the weeks I went back in my camera roll because I was like, what was I doing in my life at that point? Like, it's just this past week, and I remember I took photos of it. I have it on my phone. I was in a client's house and they had black cubes in every corner of their house, little obsidian black cubes or whatever they were made out of.
You told me about this. This was the okay.
Yeah.
You didn't mention the cubes though.
And they had tarot cards, which like literally idols, like weird like literally Saturn like esque like mythic creatures, and I have photos of it all. But I found that, so I kind of did a deep dive. I was just reading about this, like what was that, and did it have any correlation to potentially what I was experiencing? Or, I don't know if it did, but apparently that's like a really common thing in New Age witchcraft to like take little black cubes of like obsidian or like meteorite, basalt, like other, and they, first of all, which is interesting, they emit a radiation frequency that is not like you can detect it, which I also made me think about the documentary because it is radiation.
Oh, that's weird.
But also, the reason why they do it is I wrote this down actually. There's the multifaceted purpose of that is, they're corner warding stones, they're room boundary markers, they're energy anchors, protection grids, and they're supposed to absorb negative energy, ground the space, and provide psychic shielding. And obviously some of them are like used to kind of, for lack of better words, like provide the free flow of like spiritual energy. So anyways, I think that's the that's why it's called an energy anchor or whatever. But I found that to be really, really interesting with what I experienced, with like me calling the Menor police and being like, hey, what's going on here, because this is weird, and them saying, oh yeah, this is witchcraft, someone's casting spells over you and doing wonderful things. And then the week of that happening, I'm in this person's house and they have these black cubes in the corners of their rooms and witchcraft things and other. So I don't know.
Did we talk about how close that is to Kirtland? Did we have this conversation?
Oh, well, we touched base on that a little bit, but not super extensively.
Did I tell you about did I tell either of you about I told you about it. I think I called you from it. That weird, we were in an Airbnb and we were doing, we were researching like the connections between Aleister Crowley and Mormonism and the Melon Heads in Kirtland.
Oh, yes, right, yeah.
And the house that we ended up staying at was very bizarre. Cameras everywhere and like had an Egyptian totem pole out front, and then Egyptian art in it.
As one does, yeah.
Yeah, and then in the basement, under there was like a fireplace, and there were bricks, and there was one of the brick was like extruded from the fireplace a little bit, and there was a mirror sat on it, and beneath the mirror was a spiral drawn in either blood or feces, some organic looking brown material. We freaked out.
Yeah.
Cause like I consulted Richie, and I was like, this is what we found. What is this? What are you from? And he was like, with the mirror on top of it, this might be like, it suggests trying to scry this room, like trying to see it from afar, like surveil it. And like outside this house, there are like 10 cameras like pointed at the house, like in the trees and stuff. Like every entrance and exit to the house is like covers all these cameras.
Sketchy.
Yeah, we were like,
That's when you pull out the Glock and shoot the mirror
yeah.
and say, you are not going to be watching me.
yeah. So anyway, that was in Kirtland, which is like where the first Mormon temple is, and
Yeah.
yeah, and where the Melonheads were.
And literally like 5 minutes from where my old apartment was.
Yeah, Mentor is right there.
Yeah.
You literally take that road up to, I think it's a 306 to Mentor Ave. And that's exactly where I live.
Yeah, it's just right up the hill.
Yeah.
I know exactly where that is.
Weird.
That is weird.
Weird, guys. Weird.
So, particular reason why we have Christian symbols. And there's a particular reason why the world wants to imprint upon us their own symbols, their own kind, and also twist the symbolic nature of God's world.
So,
It's a tangent, but sorry.
no, here's my like wildest, most unhinged and untethered take on
Heather, you're not welcome, sir.
untethered take on what the that cube could be, and it's very much related to that. Symbols are sort of sacramental participation in a thing.
Right.
The temple is microcosm, right? The temple is symbolic of man. Man will become a temple. The true man is the temple. The whole
Right. The world.
So the temple's microcosm. When they are doing the sacrificial system and the priest is doing everything, that is participating in Christ in a sacramental way, by God's grace, allowing so whatever. So that's a physical spatiotemporal object and arrangement that is participating with the macrocosm. Okay, so this is really, like I said, it's my most unhinged take.
Love it already.
What if, remember in the Estes session, and this is, I wanted to make this point in the film and I didn't make it, and I tried, but in the Estes session where Trey is the sort of interrogator and Daryl is the channel, and again, basically what that is technologically enhanced mediumship.
Yes.
Is what they're doing. And so like that's not a thing that we do, not a thing that I do.
Don't do this, kids.
He's talking to the entity or whatever, and asks if it's responsible for the portals, and it says likely, I think, or yes. And then are they dangerous? And maybe the answer to are they dangerous is likely. Can we use them? And it says once.
Right.
All right, what if whatever entity is active there and interacting with them could spatially and temporally extend a microcosm of the place where it is and allow some degree of participation in that place.
Right.
And that place is, right, the Tartarus, the containment unit of Sheol, the grave. It is the underworld.
Right.
How many times do you get to travel to the underworld? Once. And by spatially walking into it, there is some participation in death that then, like, maybe echoes in time and eventually has the effect.
Yeah. That's kind of what I was getting at in that almost.
Yeah.
Like the symbol, like the effect of this symbol wasn't just, well, this was cool. It was it had physical consequences.
Yep.
And that to me is just fascinating. I mean, there's so many ways that you could unpack that.
Yeah, and you know, we really can only speculate there.
Right.
But I do,
Right.
I think, Ward, as much as you present that as your unhinged take, and I agree, like, we're necessarily just kind of, what if it's like this?
Right.
I think that typing works. I mean, proof of concept, I could see it.
Yeah.
Right.
Again, just don't go into a giant black cube. I think there should be some natural fight or flight response baked into our own system to say that's not a good thing. But I think, like, when you look at actual necromancy in time, it is. It's like we have to interact with an embodied place for the ritual to work.
Right.
Okay.
So there's a precedent for that. It's not just like on a whim. It's not Harry Potter magic, right?
Yes.
It's like, ooh, you gotta like invest into a thing and a place for the thing to have any power.
All right. So if that's not unhinged enough for you,
Please. Do you holding back? Are you kidding me?
So if that's possible, this is a pretty marginal scenario, right? I mean, there's people out here studying this phenomena, looking for strange things to interact with, or to at least record. So this is kind of a marginal niche case. Not everybody's engaged in this, right? But if it's possible for spatiotemporal relationships and actions to be participation in a spiritual thing, and I think we have to affirm that, at least in principle, that's true, because that's, in some sense, that's what a sacrament is. That's what we do in the supper. Is it possible that there are things we don't recognize as that just in mundane modern life? So, I don't know yet what I think about, like, people that see things or perceive things, psychic phenomena and all that. I don't know. I don't think 5 years ago, I would have said, well, 4 years ago, after being somewhat red-pilled, I would have said all of that stuff is people being fed information by evil spirits. That's the entire category. I don't know that I believe that now. And what I mean is, like, if somebody walks into a place and they feel the darkness of it, I think it might be possible that that is actually reflective of a reality that they are genuinely perceiving, not being, like, whispered to by something nefarious. It might actually be a sense that humans are capable of.
Right.
And so in that way, something like a Planned Parenthood is in many ways a very mundane spatiotemporal, just a building there.
Right.
But how much of what is going on is participation unknowingly with, death.
Right.
And not just, the act, obviously the clear, obvious act of it, but the arrangement of space itself in there.
Mm-hmm. The intent behind it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there is something there. The one caveat that I would offer to the conversation, however, is that I have been and I remain convinced from the testimony of Scripture that in the same way you cannot accidentally become a Christian, you cannot accidentally become a pagan.
Right.
Yeah. No. Yes.
I just want to say that, like, in the sense, like, oh no, because I think it becomes.
I've unknowingly walked in a pentagram.
And I don't say this to be dismissive, but like one line of thinking from there without considering this guardrail is like, oh, maybe actually all superstition is real.
Right.
And then that's you're quickly falling on your face with that. Like. Yes, an open ladder could represent a portal, but walking through it is not going to
culpability.
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
So, but I do think what you're saying there. I mean, when we think about, there's really nothing new under the sun, and so when you are actually aligning yourself with, for instance, like the practiced, repetitive, and deliberate killing of children, however sterile or therapeutic you want to call it,
right.
That is not an accidental act. You are doing that on purpose. And I don't think it all comes down to intent, but surely that does play a factor, right? And perhaps, like, even full circle to your opening Gettysburg analogy.
Right.
Like, yeah, a lot of people know of it as a Civil War monument. An equal number of people are like, it's a haunted place.
Yes.
Like, you can take all the ghost stories you want in Gettysburg. And is that it happened there because it was already a dark place, or because of what happened there, it became a dark place? Or maybe it's neither of those, and we're just totally off base. But again, going back to that idea of, like, can you actually consecrate or desecrate a place or a thing or a practice? I don't know what that means, but I feel silly to say, no, you can't.
Right.
I think there has to be something there in participation. Again, we're built to be participatory. Whether we want to or not, we are always appealing to things that are a little bigger than we are, even if it is still in the sphere of the mundane, as you say.
This may be a little, I don't know, this might be crazy, but also, like, abortion in a sense is also a type of sacrilege, because, like, it is almost like it's a demonic remembrance of almost like the institution of the supper. Like, it's like, Christ, my body given for you.
Yeah, it's the opposite of that.
Right. It's like literally, like, and that's, I think that is, I think that's actually intentional.
Yeah.
Like, very intentional.
Yeah.
Again, Kronos is known, if for nothing else, than rampant child sacrifice to meet his own ends. Like, I think I've said it elsewhere, but if there is a god of abortion, it's that dude.
Yeah, exactly.
One of the interesting, this goes back to a point you made really early on about, I think you were talking about, like, the astrological alignment of the things, and, like, how is that communicated. I was listening to Daryl Cooper of Martyr Made, did a series on the Aztecs, and he made this observation at the end of, like, I think at the end of the series about the Aztecs, human sacrifice rituals, and all of the Martyr Made is, like, pretty brutal history podcast, but he was going into detail about this particular ritual, and it seems like it's just gratuitous detail, and I'm not going to recount it for you, but there's this ritual that the Aztecs did where the priest would kill a young girl and end up, there was, like, corn involved in decorating her corpse or something, and then he would, like, wear the skin of the girl and dance. And you're like, what guy? Why are we talking about this, dude? Like, where are we going here? And then he talks about in, I think it was, like, Wisconsin, I can't remember where he was, but there was the serial killer, Ed Gein, who, and he starts describing like what Ed Gein would do. And it was almost like he was recreating the Aztec ritual, obviously without knowledge of it. And you're like, well, what is that? And Cooper seems to suggest that that it's something sort of innate to human psychology, where this somehow bizarrely the same pattern exists in Ed Gein's mind as happens to exist in the Aztec mind. And I thought, well, the thing that you the fairly obvious thing that you're missing of what if it's the same entity inspiring both things?
Right.
Like, oh, it likes this.
Yeah. I happen to have the schematic for this performance. Let me share it with you intimately and just follow the steps.
Yeah. And I guess that's kind of what I mean. And the abortion thing is a good example of like the same sort of machinations and motions being inspired with more than just like the mundane considerations of convenience and logistics and everything in mind. So, but yeah.
The Ohio Howl is a production of Dark Holler Studios and a labor of love. If you want to support the show, you can do 3 things. 1. Give us a review on your favorite podcatching app for a shout out on the show. 2. Join the Grand Reenchantment conversation on the Sword and Staff Discord, link in description. And then 3. Buy something cool for your mom from the merch store over at www.darkhollerstudios.com. Until next time, his faithfulness is a shield and buckler. We shall not fear the terror of the night.